Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming early on a Sunday morning. We're really excited to have you all here. Just in ways of introductions, my name's Ricky Silver. I'm one of the members of Empire State Indivisible. We are proud members of the Indivisible movement that's really become a national movement. The focus really is all about getting folks back engaged in the electorate. And what a great example of that is seeing all you folks out here today. So we're really excited. I'm going to hand the mic off very quickly, because we don't have that much time. The Congresswoman's been wonderful giving us the time today, and I know she has a very busy schedule, so we're gonna cut off right at 11. In terms of questions, so folks that RSVP'd has shared a number of questions, which we incorporated into the number of Indivisible groups that also submitted questions. So we've got that covered. We're so lucky to have, there she is, Laura Namias from Politico to help us moderate through those questions, keep us on track. And we're really excited to hear from both candidates and just really a positive exchange of ideas today. So want to give a special shout out to Thoughtworks for the space today. They've been wonderful in getting us set up. Thank you. And one last plug, it wouldn't be a meeting like this if we didn't do the traditional plug of hopefully you had breakfast. We are a volunteer-based organization that doesn't have a lot of funds. So if you wouldn't mind sending a small donation on the way out, we have a little donation bin. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over. I'm so excited, and thank you so much for Congresswoman Maloney to join us today, and also welcome Suraj Patel, and I'm gonna turn it over. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. You're so engaged. I'm very impressed. I am going to give each of the candidates a chance to just give a little introduction for those of you who don't know them. Just very brief, if you guys could keep it to, like a minute. No. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running again or running for the first time. If you want to start, Suraj?
Sure. Thank you all for coming today. This is actually very, very exciting for me because we have in this district for the first time in 25 years a competitive primary for this seat. The competition fuels democracy. Everybody that's in this room and in this organization are here because, at least right now, every single day that this president attacks our democratic norms and our ideals and is dismantling everything that we hold dear as New Yorkers and as progressives, and we stand idly by and do nothing, we are complacent and complicit in the dismantling of our democracy. Now, I'm a first-generation American. My family moved here from India about 10 years before I was born. I was born in Mississippi because my family bought a burnt-down seafood restaurant there, and in 1983 we opened a Mexican restaurant. It's really smart. I had the privilege and honor of growing up through almost every single income bracket in this country. And at 22, the minute I had the opportunity to, I moved to New York City. And I remember getting on that West 4th ACE train, and for the first time facing that existential question that almost every New Yorker faces every couple of weeks, which is, do you want to add value or do you want to add time? I choose value. I choose value because Congress is not an end. It is a means to an end, right? That this is the way we force onto this country racial, economic, social, and gender justice. That Donald Trump is a symptom of a long-term problem in our political establishment. That when we had power, we did not do enough to lead. We did not do enough to give people something to vote for. We need to present America from New York City, this city, getting on that train, that same ACE train. I looked around and I saw literally every single type of person in this country in one train. Black, brown, Hispanic, Asian, lesbian, gay, purple hair, platform shoes, it didn't matter. And I looked around and I realized, oh my God, in these differences, we're all the same. I was home. You see, that's what makes New York so incredible. This is one of the most dynamic, diverse, aspirational districts in America. And the world needs New York right now. That New York. Congress needs New York right now. We need to fight for criminal justice reform. This country has 25% of the world's prison population. We're only 5% of the world's population. We need to fight for debt-free college. We can't tell an entire generation of people that they need to spend the first 20 years of their lives paying back a debt simply in order to do exactly what we're telling them they need to do to be competitive in the global economy. And right now, every single day, in all 50 states, including this city, ICE is terrorizing the very same people, immigrants, documented and undocumented. They're fearful of going to court, to hospitals, to schools, churches, mosques, synagogues, everywhere.
We're going to get into a lot of those issues in these questions. I just wanted you to just introduce yourself, say a little bit about your background.
I'm a little eager, guys. Sorry.
Right, of course. And just a little bit from you, Congresswoman.
Well, first, I want to thank Indivisible, Ricky, and Danielle from Brooklyn and Empire for hosting this, and all of you for coming. And I am pleased to see the chairman of the Health Committee for New York State here, Dick Gottfried. And he's been pushing Medicare for all, and it's growing with more and more support in Congress. So I thank him for his life of devotion. I'm running because every time I walk out of my house and down the street or go to a public housing project or to a homeless shelter or even at a town hall meeting, I meet people who tell me their problems, and I am running because have the right and the ability to help them. I'm running because of Lilly Ledbetter, who was discriminated in pay. We passed the Lilly Ledbetter Act, and I've reintroduced the Equal Rights Amendment. And we're going to pass that eventually. And we are going to pass, I hope, in this Congress, a women's museum on the Mall, because you cannot recognize women or you cannot empower them without recognizing them. And I'm running for office because of the credit card bill of rights, of the people who told me about people ripping them off with high fees and discrimination. And I passed the credit card bill of rights that is credited with saving you, the consumer, $12 billion a year. And I'm running because of Peter Morley, who tells me he would be dead now if it wasn't for the Affordable Care Act, health care for all. And I'm running because every time I pass a fire station or a police officer, I'm reminded that they did not have their health care after 9/11. After 15 years, I passed $8 billion for their health care, permanent health care and compensation for their contribution to others. And I'm running for gun safety. I'm running for gun safety. And I'm running because of all of these people and many other people that I have not had a chance to meet, who have problems that need someone on their side, who will help them with their problems with concrete results, not just talk about it. And finally, I am running, and probably most importantly, as part of the Democratic leadership, to turn the House of Representatives from red to blue so that we have the power to subpoena, and we will use that power to hold this president and his administration accountable.
Thank you. Let's get into it. First of all, I'd like to say that this is not a debate, so please keep your infighting to a minimum, obviously. Be civil. And if you you both have a lot more in common, I think, than you have in different. And if you guys, just in the interest of time, just keep your outbursts and enthusiastic shows of support to, we have an hour, so I'll just get right into it. Single women, millennials, and minorities are the demographic groups that now account for the majority of voting eligible Americans. The Voter Participation Center calls this group the rising American electorate. This group is statistically less likely to be registered to vote or to be engaged in the political process. Can you talk about how you are trying to increase voter turnout and register more people to vote? Let's start with you, Congresswoman.
Well, in response to the demographic you're talking about, I went to the Wing, which is a millennial women's club where they share space and ideas, and it's very dynamic. And I went to speak to them, and they felt there wasn't enough engagement back and forth. So I started my own millennial advisory committee right then and there, and urged them to get more involved and to vote. We need to be out in our communities. I've had a rally on guns actually yesterday morning that was scheduled before the terrible event in Texas that was widely attended by some young people and all the major organizations that are devoted to combating gun violence. Through town halls, through letters, I do a weekly email, and all of them. It's hard for me because when I grew up, all you needed was a pencil to compete in school. Now they're in computers in kindergarten, but reaching out every day and trying to get better at Twitter and Facebook and all the multimedia or new tech areas. And I think just last weekend I went to a tech conference of women in tech. I think the oldest person in the room must have been 30, and it was 300 people in the Brooklyn section of my district, reaching out and speaking to them about their concerns on blockchain and other new technologies that are emerging. We're very fortunate to have a democracy and to have the ability to be part of that democracy. I work very hard with the democratic institutions and clubs in the district that I represent. Many of them were part of my early efforts to defeat a Republican incumbent, a 15-year Republican incumbent who outspent me 4-1. And the whole East Side at that time was Republican, and we worked together to turn it to blue. I think it's the only huge swath of land in the country that was converted from one party to another. And we're working together now to do that to the United States Congress. I encourage all of my friends when I go to graduations and any place, I always speak and encourage people to stand in line to vote. And I'm working to change the voting laws of New York, and joined actually Indivisible and Common Cause at conferences on really a rally on early voting. Many states have early voting. We don't have it. We should have it. We should make it easier for people to vote and to participate in our process. We should have same-day registration, vote by mail. It's very difficult to vote in New York primaries or any election here, and we need to change the rules to make it more accessible. I support making voting day or election day a national holiday so that some people do not have to choose between voting and working. I've been at the polls many a time where the lines are so long that the people have to leave. They can't even vote. They have to go to work. And who knows if they'll get out of work in time to vote. So I think we need to modernize our laws and make voting more accessible. We need to work in every way to outreach to people and to pull them into the election process. And we need to give them a reason to vote, to listen to what their concerns are, and concretely go to work to help them. After the credit card bill of rights, people are telling me they're having the same abuse with overdraft charges. So I put in a bill to correct that and keep that money in their pockets. Why should they be fined $35 for a $1 cup of coffee, which is what some of these overdraft fees are? So there are many ways to be part of the process to encourage people to be part of our great democracy and to make it stronger.
I know that you are a co-sponsor of a bill that would do make a lot of those changes to voter laws in Congress, but that can also happen at the state level, as you mentioned. Do you have plans to pressure the state legislature, pressure Governor Cuomo to make some of those changes? Online voter registration, same-day voting, automatic voter registration. Is he doing enough, and would you commit to pressuring him to do more?
Absolutely. The only thing that's consistent in public life is that it's not enough. Whatever you do, it's not enough. And the next day, it's what are you going to do for me today, and how are you going to build on it and make it stronger? And so I certainly will mention it when I see him and pressure him on that. Also, the Equal Rights Amendment. The Equal Rights Amendment has not passed in New York State. It's passed in many states, passed the House. It's got to pass the Senate. And I think this whole crowd that has run over to the Republican Party needs to be removed. If you're elected as a Democrat, serve as a Democrat. And if we have a Democratic Senate, then a lot of these things can pass, whether it's campaign finance reform or early voting. And I would say that a lot of people think that it's easy to pass a bill. It's not. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. From day one, I was working on the 2nd Avenue subway. We opened it last year. It takes time. It takes time to get the money out to make it happen. And I could talk all day. I don't know how much you want me to get go. I'm just warming up, but I don't want to hog the mic.
A response from
I will pressure anyone and everyone I see for these voting changes. I am in Washington roughly 5 days a week. I did serve in the New York State Legislature for 2 speakers and the Democratic leader of the Senate and also in the City Council. So I have very, very strong ties to the City Council, having served there, and also to the New York State Legislature.
Right.
But it's hard to pass these reforms if you don't have a Democratic Senate. And we need to change the Senate and give Andrea, the leader, Cousins, the power that she needs to lead in this area to pass them in the legislature.
Mr. Patel, I'm here from
Yeah, one thing we have in common, we could both talk all day. But I will say this is the core issue of this campaign, that the process by which we elect our leaders is significantly skewed and creates misrepresentation, that only 6.7% of people voted in this Democratic primary 2 years ago. And that is appalling. An establishment that is complacent or okay with that kind of number, to me, is out of touch with the people of this city and of this country. Now, the day after the last election, Trump election, I spent 6 hours at Olive Garden eating my feelings. But then the day after that, we, a group of us who worked at the White House, formed an organization the day after called The Arena to get young people to enter the political arena. And 4 weeks later, we had a summit in person in Nashville, Tennessee, that attracted 450 people from 32 states. Average age was like 28. Half of which had never been involved in politics before in their lives. And I realized to myself, what an incredible moment and opportunity that we have for the first time, an incredibly engaged, aware, awakened generation, the largest generation in American history, and one of its most progressive. And over the course of the year, we had summits in 4 other cities and brought 2,000 people together. And I was a full-time activist at this point. Everything from participating, I was encouraged by, I was at JFK. I was a volunteer attorney for the ACLU when the Muslim ban came down. And there were 4,000 additional people outside just supporting us and rallying. I marched at the Women's March. There's so much excitement right now about political activism, and the Democratic Party is not doing enough to bring those people into the fold. You see, the way normal campaigns work is that you go and buy a voter file and you say, here are the people who vote every single time. Let me just go knock on their doors and make phone calls because it's prohibitively expensive to get new people to vote. Well, I don't believe anyone is prohibitively expensive to deserve representation. And number 2, we have no choice but to engage new voters. 26% of America gave us Donald Trump. 45% of this country didn't vote. Now, what are we doing so wrong? Is it politics is the only business that blames its customers for not buying an unappealing product? It's, the minorities are at fault, the immigrants don't vote, the young people don't register, and it's like, guys, what are we doing so wrong to stop people from taking a free exercise? It takes 15 minutes on hopefully a beautiful June 26th morning. And if we're not doing that right, then what are we? So this campaign is premised on engaging every single person in New York's 12th congressional district. And if we do our jobs right, they'll become our voters. You know, at the beginning of this campaign, literally no one, many elected leaders and anyone else would take our phone calls or emails. And the only people that I had as constituents were high schools that would let me come and talk to their civics classes. And they had some of the most remarkably sharp, educated, informative opinions and questions. Look, the future is fantastic. The next generation is coming and it's going to fix a lot of problems. It's incumbent upon us to build a bridge to it, to bring it into the process, to use social and digital and and informative content to educate and empower people to vote instead of blame them for not. This campaign has 5 food carts around the city right now registering voters. They are actually handing out registration forms at coffee carts and halal carts in this city right now. I'm doing what this city should have been doing decades ago. New York is consistently below 40th in turnout. I launched this campaign with an op-ed in Vice talking about automatic voter registration and voter suppression in New York. When the Fifth Circuit was hearing North Carolina's racist voter suppression laws, their brief literally mentioned, well, if you think we're bad, look at New York. All right, and the IDC is not a new problem. The IDC has been around for 7 years. Where was the leadership on stopping the IDC then? Where was the leadership on stopping the IDC all these years? Where was the push for comprehensive voter reform? Where was the push for taking corporate money out of politics when we had power in 2009 and 10 as Democrats? Where was the push for ending voter suppression then? Where was our emphasis on? I've been talking about gerrymandering since 2011, doing lectures on this on talks on law, giving continuing legal education to lawyers, way before it was sexy, and it's still not. And yet, this is what I'm saying. We are in the most educated district in America. And in every facet of American life, whether that's finance or entertainment, media or technology, we lead. We look to New York for this kind of leadership.
Well,
right?
On that note, let's talk about campaign finance reform. I'm going to start with actually the second part of my question. Both of you have looked at your donations so far, your latest FEC filings. Mr. Patel, as of the end of March, 98% of your donations have come from outside of this district. And research shows that people who donate, even small dollar donations, are more likely to vote. Why do so much fundraising from outside of, from people who are not going to be casting ballots in this election? Yeah.
Sure. Well, look, last time I checked, Wall Street was also not in this district. And we don't take, and we do not take corporate PAC money. Every single dollar on my campaign is from a real, live, breathing human. First off, that maybe I'm old-fashioned, but that is what I think should be powering our campaigns. Now, I happen to be a first-generation American. There is a rising Indian American community around this country that is very proud to see leadership, proud to see representation. And in the history of the United States, there's never been a problem with ethnic groups supporting one another when they were entering the stage of leadership and representation. The Irish, every single group has done it in the past. There's a lot of support for representation that looks like us, probably because right now this country's president and right-wing media is trying to erase people like my story out of existence. So I take money from people around the country, obviously, and then there's a lot of support for bold progressive leadership. Look, frankly, the world is looking and the country is looking to New York for this kind of leadership. We have to be the ideas factory so that people in Ohio and Texas and wherever can just go win their races. And so there's a lot of support from people who are looking at how we're engaging new voters, and they want to see the Democratic Party do that. And so we started raising money from investors and stuff that wanted to see if someone could break through and engage new voters. And one of our promises has been to make the electorate more representative of the population on election day. And that means getting young people and minorities and immigrants to vote at the same levels as everybody else. And there's a lot of interest in that because I too believe that winning this November is going to require, is not only is required for us existentially to stop this president, but I also believe that the only way we're going to do it is through innovation in the way we do our elections and all of that. And when we win this thing on June 26th, I have 5 months to present to our fellow progressives across the country a playbook, a roadmap to how to change their demographics of their electorate as well.
Have you actually refused any corporate donations? Has anyone tried to, has a corporation tried to give money to your campaign?
We have refused,
no?
we from day one put on our website, we don't take corporate PAC money. We just don't take corporate PAC money. And I won't.
For the Congresswoman, it's become sort of like the vogue at the moment for some progressive politicians, candidates, Senator Gillibrand, Cory Booker, to say that they will not take donations from corporate PACs. Would you commit to that? If yes, explain why. If not, why not?
I am going to follow the rules that are in place and the laws that this country has passed. And to put it in perspective, one of my first jobs was with Common Cause, and I was the state issues chair of Common Cause, and my job was to pass campaign finance reform in the New York State legislature. I was not successful, and to this day, they have never passed a campaign finance reform law in New York State. I was elected to the city council in 1982, and one of the first bills that I put in, which became Intro 1, was campaign finance reform. I worked on that bill for 10 years and finally passed it. And at the time, it was called the toughest and best campaign finance reform bill in the nation. The city council has since then built on it, made it stronger, and made it more democratic. But I was elected to Congress, and when I went to Congress, I was co-chair of the Campaign Finance Committee in Congress for the freshman class. I got so many co-sponsors on our campaign finance bill, this is a true story, that Speaker Gephardt moved me into the leadership meetings and started working with me on the bill that we eventually passed in Congress on campaign finance reform, which limited contributions, exposed who was giving, created PACs, but capped them. For example, all of our not-for-profits also have caps, such as Common Cause, says they probably don't have one, but teachers, such as all of our environmental groups, all of which have endorsed me, Sierra Club, League of Conservation Voters, all of them have PACs. Human Rights Campaign, they have a PAC, they've endorsed me. But in any event, that was part of the reform. Then came Citizens United. In my opinion, it is among the worst, if not the worst, Supreme Court decision in the history of our country. And the result is that we have more dark money. We don't know where it's coming from. We don't know who's trying to woo whom. There is no exposure. You don't have to report to anyone. You can create these 521 or 527 accounts and give as much money as you want. And they lifted the cap for individuals to give money to their own campaigns, and for any individual can give literally hundreds of millions of dollars to campaigns and not report who they're giving it to. So we have a terrible system now. We have a system where anyone could walk in and dump $20 million against me and him, and I don't know. There is no control on it right now. The Citizens United group that has been formed, not-for-profit, to combat Citizens United decision has endorsed me, and I'm on all the bills to end this, to have a constitutional amendment, to end the Citizens United. But we are in a worse shape than we have ever been in my entire life. I'd say most areas have improved. Even the Second Avenue subway's improved, and that was around for 100 years. Most things get better, but in terms of money in politics that is totally unaccountable, that you don't know where it's coming from, and you can't cap it, is worse than it has ever been in the history of our country.
I know that a lot of Democrats in Congress have been talking since Citizens United happened about getting rid of it. If come November, the Democrats don't take back the Congress, what can you do now? What can you do in the minority to, if you want to, lessen the influence of corporate money or perform some sort of campaign finance best practices without being in the majority, without getting rid of Citizens United? What can you do? And yeah, I'll ask you first.
Sure. I just want to say that this is the point, right? That Citizens United is a horrible decision. and it has significantly skewed our democracy. And it is the single biggest issue is our representation, right? That like, we're not gonna get action on gun control until the NRA can't buy politicians. We're not gonna get meaningful action on climate change until the fossil fuel industry cannot buy politicians. We're not gonna get action on criminal justice reform while for-profit prisons lobby for stronger sentences. But we have an obligation. I'm going to keep coming back to this. This is New York City. We have an obligation from here to lead by example. We don't have Republicans to battle right now in this district. And so we shouldn't be opening up ourselves to challenges of hypocrisy by taking corporate PAC money in one breath and then saying we want to overturn Citizens United in another. The idea here is that we have the luxury here and therefore the obligation to lead by example. We shouldn't take corporate PAC money from a place like this.
Did you want to respond to that?
As one who is spending more money and raising more money than I am, it's interesting to hear your statement. But in terms of corporate PAC money, no one has fought the banks harder than I have. In fact, they even financed a candidate against me and put millions in to defeat me after I passed what was called the Credit Card Bill of Rights that clamped down on unfair, deceptive, anti-competitive processes. It's the first time that we passed a bill in Congress holding them accountable. And according to 3 separate studies, one was the Pew Foundation, one was the Consumer Protection Financial Consumer Protection Bureau. And the third was New York University with 2 other universities. And they had reports that it saved over $12 billion a year, passed in 2009 at a presidential bill signing with President Obama. I have passed over 70 bills, 11 of which have been in presidential bill signings. That is reserved for very, very important bills, such as the Credit Card Holders Bill of Rights. So no one fought harder than I did to fight them. And if they want to still contribute to me, well, I'm not going to turn down money, especially when my opponent is raising more money than I am. But the main thing is, what do you do with your life? What are you doing to help people? What steps are you taking to make this country better? And it's not just talk. And you don't have to be elected to Congress to do things to help people. I had 4 different anti-gun groups show up with their research, with their work, to talk about what they were doing to combat illegal, unfair, too many guns. Believe me, if guns made us safer, we'd be the safest nation on earth, and we are far from it. They weren't elected to Congress, but they were doing work to help people. And I can tell you that no one has been more effective in not only helping to craft Dodd-Frank, which cracked down on the abusive practices that led us to the worst financial crisis, according to Christina Romer, the head of the Economic Advisory Council to President Obama. She said the last financial crisis was 5 times worse than the Great Depression. And we are put in all of these ways to protect consumers. The Republicans are trying to slash and roll them back. I spend a lot of time combating, along with Elizabeth Warren, who's endorsed my reelection, combating to save those protections to save you. So
let's, if we can, move on to something that I think a lot of people in here might be interested in. I'm interested in this, which is housing policy. I actually, I was a little surprised, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, looking at both of your platforms and your materials. Congresswoman, I didn't see a section on housing policy on your campaign page, and Mr. Patel, your campaign website includes a proposal to create more housing of all kinds. Some congressional candidates recently have talked about plans to limit rent increases or use federal housing funds to build affordable housing or to provide direct down payment assistance. Can both of you tell us plans that you support, how they will help this district specifically? Specific ideas that you have for helping people deal with the housing crisis. Mr. Patel, you want to go first?
Sure. I do just want to address one thing, though, that, look, elections are about the future, right? We are electing people to regulate and govern the future. What is a government if it's not just a contract between this generation and the next? And so Bill Clinton used to say, look, the candidate who talks about the future 9 times out of 10 wins. Let's get back in the future business. And I understand that we have a long history here, but you know, I have done a lot of things that have been activists. I've been a business ethics professor for 3 years, teaching people in business ethics. That's God's work. I've been on the front lines as an ACLU attorney at JFK. I've done all these things. The only thing I haven't done yet is been in Congress. It seems to me that's my only crime. And I will fix that too. But okay, housing policy. Look, I said that we need more housing of all kinds, market rate, affordable, subsidized, everything. The federal share of NYCHA funding has declined by $3 billion since 2001 to nearly nothing. NYCHA faces a $25 billion deficit. The congressperson from this district should be sitting on the transportation committee because that controls budgets for NYCHA. We don't have that right now. This city desperately needs more housing of all kinds. We need transit density, so that we can build higher and more dense buildings as you go farther out along mass transit lines. But this isn't a problem that was created overnight. It was created by decades of NIMBYism, decades of keeping housing out, keeping people of lower incomes out of neighborhoods, decades of gentrification that only affect our poorest neighborhoods. And so it's going to take decades to turn around and fix. But yeah, I think that we need to be recommitting the federal government to New York. Every dollar New York sends to Washington as a state, we receive 81 cents back. Florida receives $4 for every dollar it sends Washington. Where are our fighters for New York? Right? I mean, the facts are right there. We need to recommit the federal government to knowing that the most dynamic economic region in its country needs our help for transportation, needs its help for housing, right? And so that's, I think, what we want to be talking about, is being a fierce fighter and an advocate for bringing federal funds for NYCHA, but also to help use the bully pulpit that you have as a congressperson to not pander and protest homeless shelters or new housing.
Do you, so far I've just heard that you would in Congress work to increase federal funding for NYCHA, but do any other specific?
So I mean, public housing in New York, and not just public, sorry, all housing in New York is subject to, is a city and state issue, city issue primarily, but I don't ever see enough support from our Congress people for, new development and housing where we need it.
Congresswoman, specific ideas for dealing with the housing crisis.
As a fierce fighter and advocate for New York, I challenged a Republican incumbent because aid to the city of New York was cut 74% during his time in office. And I ran on who needs a congressman who doesn't fight for the city of New York, and he's voted to cut funding in crucial areas. And I felt it on the city council because all we could do was cut major areas such as housing, transportation, healthcare need a federal component. And when I went to Congress, I fought for changing that. And really aid to the city of New York has been going up since then, until recently with this new tax bill. We had to fight like the Dickens to keep the affordable housing tax credit in the laws of our country that allows our developers to build affordable housing. Many of our housing programs have been cut. During the time I've been in Congress, I have put up 7 senior housing, affordable housing projects, 7 of them in my district. And we need more of them. But this was put up under a program called 202 Housing. They have cut that from the budget. I am fighting to get it back in the budget. And in terms of public housing, that is critical. I remember when I was on the city council, we had roughly 400,000 units of public housing. We had 200,000 people on the waiting list, just an astronomical need. But the city did not, they cut back their support of public housing. The state cut it back, and the federal government has cut it back. Just recently, HUD floated, if you may have read about it, there was a rumor out there that they were going to cut back on Section 8 housing. That is a subsidized program for people who need housing, to subsidize them. They were going to cut that, and they were going to raise the rents in public housing, along with the Nydia Velasquez and the other Hakeem Jeffries and others. We fought that. They now are saying they didn't mean it. That's a mistake. But sometimes it's not what you do, it's what you hold on to, especially in this particular Congress. And my whole life as an aide in the state government, on the city council, and in Congress, we have fought to protect rent control, the Emergency Tenant Protection Act, the Cooperative Condominium Conversion Tenant Protection Act, and all of these bills that protect housing on the local level. I say that housing is a necessity. It is very hard to do because it's so expensive. I've been working with the mayor's office on an RFP to take an area that used to be a hospital and convert that into affordable housing. But it's something that we have to continue to fight on, and no matter what you do, it's never enough. And public housing is a particular challenge right now to not only operate it better, but to try to figure out other ways that we can better finance it.
Let's talk about one local housing development or potential housing development in particular that I think a lot of people in your district are very curious about, which is the plan for Sunnyside Yards in Queens. I know the city and Amtrak are part of the development plan. There could be as many as 24,000 new apartment units in the area. It's already exploding in terms of development. There are a lot of elected officials in the area who were very surprised, and maybe I'm not going too far to say that they were annoyed with the way that the mayor's office put together a committee to help develop the plans for Sunnyside Yards. And I think that some people are worried that the plans are not going to be put together with the help and input of people who live in the community. So I'd like to know from each of you what you think of this development, specifics, if you can, and what would you personally do to ensure that the development process at Sunnyside Yards takes into account the considerations of all the people who live there who want to be part of the process. And if you want to go first, Congressman.
Well, I was just at a meeting 2 weeks ago, and Assemblywoman Nolan's office on this particular thing where community leaders and electeds were demanding more input and more of a role in the development of it and the planning of it. And we have been guaranteed certain voices, a certain number of seats in planning that. As one that is on the federal level, where I can be most helpful is in the transportation area. As I said, I have $10 billion coming into the city from federal funds. One is $2 billion for what's called the East Side Connector, which goes through the Sunnyside Yards. And there was I got built into it in the planning on the federal level, a stop in Sunnyside. One of the things is not only the planning of the housing, but that the infrastructure is there, both the sewage, the water, the transportation, the police, the fire, the whole infrastructure has to be put in place. And that's one of the big problems. And as they're building this connection, there should be a stop in Queens that would help the economic development, the quality of life, help move people back and forth. I spoke to the mayor about it. It's in his plans. It had an environmental impact statement on the federal level, but it's not in the plan now. And if they build that connector without a stop in Queens, you'll never get a stop in Queens. So I think that is an absolute priority. I met with LISC, which is it's a neighborhood chamber of commerce, works with businesses in the neighborhood to champion that, along with Senator Generis, we need the state to come out and put it in the state MTA plan. And I think that that is something that would really help people and the economic development of the city. And as I said, if they don't get that built into the plan that's taking place now, I don't think it'll ever happen. So that's very important.
What?
So I spend a lot of time in Long Island City and Astoria with people who live there, not elected officials, but people who live there. And the thing I hear so much and so the most often is that no one is denigrating or hating the fact that there are towers and people moving in and people being built. Look, New Yorkers don't just lift the ladder up behind them once we get to here. We understand that. But the city needs to create a responsible development plan so we're not begging for schools. We have people leaving Long Island City. We have kids getting bussed out of Long Island City to Sunnyside to go to school now simply because overrun development is happening without any responsible accompaniment of schools, parks, and an R train that runs better than 60% on time. And it's the only artery in that area. And so, look, I think that we have neglected for too long responsible development and services. The Sunnyside project particularly, has been a top-down thing because there is federal government involvement in this. But I don't think it can shirk the regular traditional development, the community input process. Union Square Tech Hub near me is a really fantastic, I live on 12th and A. I'm not gonna give you the exact address, but at Union Square Tech Hub, is a really great example of a community board and stakeholders coming together and building what is a fantastic community facility with housing and all of that. I just think that, all of this development needs to be accompanied with schools and parks and playgrounds.
Just to clarify that, am I correct in understanding that you both think that transit options need to be increased before the development can go forward? Or, I'm not understanding how you're differentiating yourself from the mayor's office on Sunnyside Yards. Specifically, are there things that you think absolutely have to be in the plan besides specific number of schools, or should the transit options be in place before it goes ahead? Or
I personally think that this is the one shot you're not going to get promised transit options later and then get them. So I personally think that in this, whether the order is there, housing first or transit, no matter what, we need a firm commitment that we do get the transit options alongside this development simultaneous to it, or else we'll never get it.
I would say that one of the easiest things to do is get the schools. And on the east side, where there's been a tremendous amount of development, we have working with developers and the school board and the construction office of the school board. We put up 6 new schools to address overcrowding and pressures in the neighborhood. So any developer who comes in is going to have to build a new school or several schools. It'll probably be many. Now this thing will take place over many years. Now the Sunnyside Yard stop is something that everybody says, of course we're for it, but there's no money for it. So if there's no money for it, you're not for it. And right now there's no city money for it, there's no state money for it, there's no federal money for it. Now, when I went to Congress, the rule was you could get the federal money first before you got state money. So I got all the federal money for the 2nd Avenue subway and the East Side Connector before we ever got any state money. Now they've changed the law. You have to get the state money first before you can get federal money. For example, for the 2nd Avenue subway, I have money in the budget sitting there in Washington, but it cannot be released until the state does certain steps and the city to move the next leg up to 125th Street, i.e. Do the engineering studies and all these other studies that are theirs to be done and paid for, and certain engineering efforts. And so the law has changed. Now you've got to do the city and state before you get the federal money. And my charge right now is to kick the city and state on the 2nd Avenue subway, because if I don't, that money's not going to stay there. You can get money in the budget, but all of you know it can get in the budget and be removed from the budget if you don't grab it and get it soon. So it's now a different chicken and egg. It has to move on the city and state level. So we all have our jobs to do. Because I'm in Washington roughly 5 days a week, I have to rely on my city council members and state representatives to line up the city and state and do a lot. I'm supporting their efforts, but it's a team effort. I mean, it's a team effort to get these things done, and they're critical.
Would you both commit to, if you were reelected or in your case elected to Congress, would you commit to holding town hall meetings on the Sunnyside Yards project, regular town hall meetings?
I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would.
Absolutely. And with the on-screen questions, the thing is that town halls should be real. We're already hosting them across the city, and I'm not even in Congress yet. No, we would absolutely commit to it.
Let's move on to immigration. I know we're running out of time. Congresswoman Maloney, during the Clinton administration, we know that you voted for 2 bills that have become controversial recently. The first known as IRA, and another AEDPA, that effectively expanded the crimes that made people eligible for deportation. I wonder, a lot of Democrats voted for them in the mid-90s. But there was also a 2016 House resolution that condemned the legislation that a lot of Democrats signed on to. I think you were not a co-sponsor of that. Would you support that today? And do you, in hindsight, regret your votes for IRA and the other piece of legislation?
Well, I believe you're referring to the 1994 Criminal Justice Act. That
No.
this
is a 1996 IRA, and AEDPA.
Was that the criminal justice piece that Clinton
The Immigration
championed?
Reform Act.
The Immigration Reform Act.
The Immigration Reform Act.
Yeah.
And I voted for it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I'm a strong proponent for immigration reform. In fact, we had a huge win, I would say, Friday of this week in Congress on DACA, which is the bill that would give status to so-called the dreamers, those who came to this country as young people, know no other country really than America. We have something called a motion to discharge, which would force a vote on the floor. We use it for controversial subjects such as DACA, where there's a lot of tension between the two parties. We filed a motion to discharge on DACA. Every single Democrat signed on to it, and 20 Republicans. If we get 4 more, we can force this bill to the floor for a vote. And in my judgment, if we could force it to the floor for a vote, then this bill would pass. So I have supported DACA. I've supported immigration reform. I have supported many things. The one area is Clinton's criminal justice bill, which he now regrets, and I regret too. But research in the country has evolved, and it has showed that mandatory sentencing does not work. It's not a deterrent, and it's been very discriminatory because it's resulted in more minorities being arrested than anyone else unfairly. So there are several bills in Congress to really abolish mandatory sentencing and rely more on the judgment of judges to implement it. When you talk about ICE has been out of control. You can have border security without deporting everyone. And ICE needs to be reformed, along with Elijah Cummings, who is the chairman of the Government Reform and Oversight Committee. We've sent a letter to the chairman, Trey Gowdy, to have hearings on ways to reform and improve it. Now, ICE also takes control of something that's very important, and that is ending sex trafficking, human trafficking at the border, which has become the second largest crime in terms of generating money for the criminals, because it's so lucrative to sell human bodies that can be sold over and over till they die, unlike a gun or dope that can be only sold once. So their activity there in stopping gun trafficking at the border and violence at the border is important.
Well,
But in terms of their deportation activities, they're out of control.
I know that Mr. Patel, your immigration platform calls for defunding ICE. So
That's
it
right.
seems like this is an area in which the two of you may have a significant difference.
Yeah, we do. And the reason is this. That 1996 immigration reform bill started fast-track deportations, started detentions, started all these things. 2001 bill created ICE. And our 2018 bill will end it. This country had survived for 200-some years without ICE. We have other law enforcement agencies. But look, when I say defund ICE, which is something that this campaign said we were going to do, we examined the research and we said, look, since 1996, the ratchet on immigration has only gone in one direction: more border security, more detentions, more arbitrary hearings, and terrorizing our communities across this country, the most marginalized population, the voiceless, the 11 million undocumented people living in this country. And if we as Democrats aren't going to stand up for the most marginalized populations, then who will? And from a district like this, we should be leading on that. But let me tell you what. Yeah, let me explain what this is about. If we defund ICE, we tell Donald Trump, who's a racist president, that he cannot have this tool that he is using with impunity to terrorize communities across this country. That if he wants this tool back, he needs to use it at the borders. It's a customs enforcement agency. It should be not in our cities. It should be at our borders. It needs to be significantly reformed. And if he's not willing to reform it, if he's not willing to give us a solution for dreamers, if he's not willing to give us a long-term plan for comprehensive immigration reform, then we will take away his tool. It's called leverage, and Democrats do not use it. And so to defund ICE is a means to bring Republicans back to the negotiating table. I do not know how, after 20 years of doing the same thing over and over and over, we expect a different result. Do you think Republicans are just going to grow a heart all of a sudden next year?
The easiest way to reform ICE in anything is to get rid of Trump. That's the easiest way. And we're working on vote him out or get a check on him in 2018. And if you have Democrats in power, then they can look at Mr. Mueller's facts and see where we go for that, whether it's impeachment or not. So the easiest way is through an election in our Congress. Now, under ICE, with the leadership of President Barack Obama, they only deported people if they were considered a threat to the United States security. That's what they should go back to. So a lot of what happens in the country comes from the policies of the executive. And when we are in the minority, there is no way that we have maybe every now and then, we may have it with DACA now with a motion to discharge, which is very unusual. But the party in power, they control what goes to the floor. They control the agenda. They control everything. And what is the biggest problem in our country right now is that we have a Republican president, a Republican Congress in the House of Representatives, and a Republican Senate. So no matter how many bad things they do, until you vote them out of office, they can continue doing it because they have the votes and they have the people there. We have to change that in 2018. And the easiest way is to have a check, have a Democratic Congress so that we can subpoena and hold the administration and Mr. Trump accountable for their actions. And that's what I intend to do with your support. I view public life as a loan, one that I must fearlessly combat on your behalf. And I have a record of accomplishment, even winning in Democrat and Republican controlled Congresses. Just 3 weeks ago, we had a presidential bill signing on one of my anti-sex trafficking bills that I passed with a Republican Congress that cracked down on selling girls and boys on the internet. That's a huge accomplishment. It's going to save lives. So you can do it every now and then. But generally, they control what goes to the floor, and that's why we're using the motion to discharge to get the DACA bill on the floor. And I pray to God we get the 4 additional Republicans so that we can have a vote on this important life-saving. And I want to add this. What is so exciting is that in my job, you can do things that impact and save lives. The Debbie Smith bill has been called the most important anti-rape bill that's ever passed. That's put rapists behind bars, saved other women from being hurt. You can do things that are broad, but you can also help individuals. And the entire time that I've been in Congress, this is a true statement, my office and I have been able to save every single person that they tried to deport.
Can you?
Except under this president. Under this president, there was a father of 5 in my district that they deported no matter what I did because he had a criminal background, even though he wasn't a threat now. We couldn't save him. So a lot of it you can do just through your own office. Say, as I said, no one was deported that came to my office that had a problem the whole time I've been in Congress until this year.
I want to just say something there. The thing is that I'm an institutionalist. Okay, we don't have any guarantees that a president like Donald Trump won't get elected again. We don't have any guarantees of a Democratic Congress. We don't have any guarantees of what happens in 2020. But it is incumbent upon us to preserve and protect the institutions of this democracy. And if a tool can be used by a president who aggrandizes his power in a racist way, then the tool is the problem. Because we don't have a guarantee ever. We should be reforming our democracy. There are significant structural issues that have brought us to the point where Donald Trump got to become president. Now, this campaign is fully about winning the House back in 2018 because I don't believe that this is fairly existential. But I just don't believe that the Democrats, with the current strategy of simply being anti-Trump and hoping for Mueller, is the way to win back the hearts and minds of this country. We have to be for something in this country. We have to be for Medicare for all and debt-free college and ending these unending wars across the Middle East. And if we do those things and we stand up for people, then and only then will we deserve the majority back for the American people.
We are just about out of time, so I want to very quickly get you guys on the record on one more issue. I know you
May I respond to that? Because there is an inaccuracy in it.
Okay.
My colleague needs to go back to Government 101. Now, I agree. I support, and Democrats agree on debt-free college. We endorsed Bernie Sanders' policies. We also have bills in to renegotiate college student loans. We have bills in to reform, the whole ICE thing. But the problem is, if you don't have the majority, you can't pass it. You can't make it happen unless you get a majority. No matter how great your ideas are, you have to have a majority of Democrats in order to pass it. So you can say that you're for all of these things. I'm for it too. I'd like to end every war. I'd like peace in the world. I'd like a debt-free college. I'd like guaranteed jobs for everyone. I'd like Medicare for all. Right now, wake up. Read the papers. We're fighting to hold on to the Affordable Care Act. People are losing their health care. I would like Medicare for all. We can't pass it right now. We're trying to preserve the Affordable Care Act. 64 times they trotted us down to the floor and tried to erase it completely. I don't know how they run on Vote for Me. I took health care away from 30 million Americans, but that's what their platform is. So it is a battleground right now to just hold on to the democratic values. Why do I feel so passionately about the Equal Rights Amendment? Because I spend 3/4 of my time fighting to hold on to the rights that women won that they're trying to take away every single day. They took another right away over this weekend. So listen, you can say I'm for everything. I'm for a perfect world. You've got to pass it, and believe me, it's not that easy. It takes a lot more than talking. It takes hard work and working across the aisle, building coalitions. And I've had 11 bills signed by presidents of the United States and 70 that I've passed.
First off,
Can we move
I teach about our democracy at one of the finest business schools in America in this district. So I understand this. What I'm trying to say is that we are precisely in this position of not being in the majority because we did not lead with the American people when we had the power. Because when we did have both houses of Congress and the presidency, we wasted our time. We wasted our time voting against the Iran deal or holding anti-vaccine hearings.
Can we actually, speaking of that, the Congresswoman has to leave. She has another engagement, but I want to get into one more subject area, which is Iran. Okay. So both of you, Congresswoman, you didn't support the Iran deal along with a lot of other members of New York's congressional delegation, but you also felt that abandoning the Iran deal was a bad idea. You haven't weighed in on the possibility for war with Iran. Do you think that the president has the congressional authority to take military action there? Do you think that that action would require congressional approval, and would you vote yes or no on going to war with Iran?
I am totally for negotiation and peaceful settlement. I would vote no against a war with Iran, absolutely, completely, and totally. And we are struggling now with how to combat this and to get more of a say on these types of issues. After the attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon and on our country, there was a vote to use force against Al-Qaeda. And they used that vote that took place way back then, right after the attack, to start their activities. And they base their activities now, whether it's in Africa, the Sudan, or anywhere, on that war powers. It was authorization to use force against Al-Qaeda, and they claim it's Al-Qaeda's everywhere, so therefore they're using force. We are working on trying to stop that, and in response to the Iran decision, it was one of the most difficult in my life. I made a pledge to talk to every single constituent who wanted to meet with me on it, which meant that I never left the city, nor did my staff, for an entire summer. We were there every day, June, July, and August, meeting with people who wanted to meet with us on both sides of it. I went to Washington many times for briefings and read every single classified document, which I cannot talk about. But after reading all of these documents, I felt that it did not achieve which it was supposed to achieve, which was to end the ability of Iran to develop nuclear power, and in fact did not have the oversight and enforcement powers. And I had a line I wanted added. One of the biggest problems with it is that it gave Iran literally billions and billions of dollars. And I wanted to say, you can't use this money for terrorist activities. They are responsible for financing a lot of terrorist activities against democracies around the world. They wouldn't even add that line. So I voted against it. Since then, Iran got the benefits. They got the billions of dollars. They got the sanctions reduced. They got the benefits. It's now time for our coalition to get the benefits, which is they stop their program, that they allow inspections. And since then, I have voted 10 times to keep that plan in place. I voted on the floor of Congress, and a lot of the debates are in the Financial Services Committee, in which I serve, and I voted against them on the Financial Services Committee. I always have debates with my Chief of Staff, Minna, who's here, on what's going to happen. I didn't think that he would pull out of the Iran deal. It was, we brought the whole world community together on it. This was a huge achievement, but he did. Now, where are we now? Where we are now moving forward is that our allies, which include the European Union, and in this case, China and Russia, are now moving forward to keep the plan in place. And there wasn't a statement at the end of his statement where he said he was open to renegotiating it. Maybe that's an avenue. President Obama and others feel that maybe the Iranian people will stand up against the mullahs and take back their country. That's another scenario. So right now, we don't know what Iran is going to do. We do know that our allies in this particular agreement are standing fast on enforcing it and honoring it. And I support their position. That's what we should do. That's what I wish my country had done. But he's not my president. And it makes you miss President Obama. But I'll tell you, I don't know what Iran's going to do. And Iran has not made clear whether they will honor it or abolish it and go back to their activities on moving forward with a nuclear weapon, which would be a very, very dangerous for world peace. But I support negotiation, and I just want to say that I keep waiting for this job to get easier, and it doesn't. You know, no matter what happens, I thought after 9/11, nothing could be more horrible. I thought after the financial crisis, how could we live through such terrible days? And then many of us, I'd say half my district was underwater after Sandy with tremendous pain and suffering, particularly in Stuyvesant Town. By the way, in terms of housing, I should have mentioned saving affordable housing. And I got a decision in Washington that said that no plan could go forward on their settlement for the people in the housing unless the tenants approved of it. That gave them huge leverage, that gave them a wonderful way to preserve affordable housing there. But it's a challenge. This is a particular challenge. We are all on pins and needles in this country as we move forward, and then compounding it is now the June 12th talks for peace on the peninsula. If that happens, that would be wonderful, but there's also the whole way that issue works in with the China trade and the work that we're doing to try to stop intellectual property and theft in other areas. So there are a lot of moving targets on the table. But right now, I have places to go and promises to keep, and and I'm late, which is not unusual. So I want to thank everyone, particularly my opponent, for being here.
Just your did you support the
yeah, first off, let me
Iran
just say that
deal
even if the congressman wants to go, that's fine. There's no place I'd rather be than in front of voters right now. But I will say this. Look, we can have war hawks in this country. We're always going to have them. But they ought not to be able to represent one of the most progressive districts in America.
I object.
This is, well, I mean, on the Iraq war, on wearing, sounding the drumbeat and wearing a burqa to the floor during the run-up to the Afghanistan war, and then on the Iran deal, on this one thing, I will say that I remember looking over at my brother, with whom I live in the East Village, and saying to him, man, someone ought to primary the congresswoman after this horrendous vote against President Obama's biggest diplomatic achievement, and one of the biggest diplomatic achievements this country's diplomatic corps has made in almost half a century. And circumstances would have it that I ended up being that person. But I do believe that this is a spirited debate and disagreement on this, but I am going to err on the side of diplomacy and peace over war as last resort every single time.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you so much to everyone for coming. I know the Congresswoman does have to leave, so I want to make sure we cut it off there. Laura, thank you so much for moderating. Everyone was great. And just one last plug before I know everyone kind of runs out is if you're interested in getting involved with our group, the Indivisible movement is something really special that we're all excited to be a part of, and we're always looking for more people to get involved. So we're going to hang around, stick around. Feel free to stick around if there's any food or coffee left, obviously. And again, last plug, if you happen to be able to make a little donation on the way out, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks so much.